when 40 years of history collapse in 24 hours. There is a saying in geopolitics that change usually takes decades. Nations rise and fall over generations. Power structures evolve slowly, imperceptibly, until they do not. Until one day arrives when the entire framework of a region's political order collapses in a single shocking moment. Today is that day. Welcome to this special live episode of JPtruelens. What has happened in Iran in the last 24 hours is not merely a military event or a political assassination. It is a tectonic shift. 40 years of history has changed in a single day. The definition of power in the Middle East has been rewritten. The definition of regional dominance has been overturned. The definition of peace and war has been transformed within a span of hours. And at the center of it all, the confirmation that Ayatollah Ali Khamenei has been assassinated. This confirmation has now come directly from Iranian state media itself. So what does this mean? What is its impact on Iran, on the Middle East, on global oil markets, on nuclear deterrence, and on USA? These are not abstract questions. The answers to these questions will determine the shape of the world you and I will live in for the next several decades. That is why, today on JPtruelens, we are going to focus on 5 critical questions and answer them with as much clarity and depth as the rapidly evolving situation allows. The 5 questions are: first, what exactly happened in the last 24 hours, and how deep does Mossad's penetration of the Iranian system actually go? Second, what does Khamenei's death mean for Iran's internal power structure? Third, is the chain of command in Iran broken, or are those 2,000-plus ballistic missiles still pointed at their targets? Fourth, can forced regime change from above ever actually bring peace, or does history warn us otherwise? And fifth, what does all of this mean for the international world order, for American legitimacy, and critically, for USA? What happened in the last 24 hours? Let us start at the beginning. The attack occurred on February 28th. After months of warnings, intelligence reports, and escalating tensions, we received confirmation that a coordinated aerial strike had been launched, a strike of an entirely different nature from anything that had come before. Israel, operating in direct coordination with American assets, launched this attack from U.S. bases and aircraft carriers positioned across the region. Crucially, and this is the point that separates this attack from every prior Israeli or American strike on Iran, the target was not nuclear infrastructure. It was not a uranium enrichment facility. It was not a group of nuclear scientists. The target this time was the top military and political leadership of Iran. The explicit objective was elimination followed by regime change. Publicly, America and Israel framed this in the language of democracy restoration. Privately, the calculation was simpler: decapitate the leadership and let the existing popular discontent do the rest. Initially, Iran's response was defiant. State media insisted that the leadership was intact, unharmed, and fully functional. But Iran's behavior told a completely different story. The fury and scale of Iran's retaliatory actions, opening fronts against 7 countries, striking wherever American bases were located, communicated something critical. Iran was not operating from a position of strength. It was operating from a position of rage and desperation. There is a difference. A state that is confident in its leadership does not retaliate with that level of frantic aggression. Then the silences began. Iranian state television, which had promised a presidential address, went quiet. No address came. By nightfall, Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu announced that Israel had indications Khamenei had been eliminated. Then came a tweet from Donald Trump. And when an American president issues a public statement on a military outcome, that is functional confirmation. The final confirmation arrived hours ago, when Iranian state media itself acknowledged the assassination of Ayatollah Khamenei. Now, how did this happen with such precision? The answer lies in the nature of ground intelligence. America has possessed precision-guided missiles for decades. That technology is not new. What is new, what has changed the entire logic of modern warfare, is Mossad's penetration of Iranian institutions. Trump himself hinted at this when he addressed the nation. The precision of this strike was not merely technological. It was human. Mossad's intelligence network inside Iran appears to have reached into the highest levels of the system, providing exact location data, movement patterns, and bunker coordinates. The satellite imagery tells part of the story. Bunker-busting bombs were used. Khamenei was not caught in the open. He had retreated to a fortified underground bunker. But it made no difference. He was tracked there and eliminated with surgical precision. And it was not just Khamenei. Reports now confirm that senior commanders of the IRGC, the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps, the backbone of the regime's military power, have also been killed. The top of Iran's command structure has been systematically dismantled. It is also important to acknowledge the human factor inside Iran. Khamenei's regime was profoundly unpopular, particularly among the younger generation, the urban educated class, and those who had suffered economic ruin under his governance. When a state is this unpopular, intelligence penetration becomes far easier. Mossad did not have to try very hard to find Iranians willing to cooperate. The regime's brutality created the very conditions that enabled its own destruction. Who was Khamenei, and what does his death mean for Iran? To understand the magnitude of what has happened, you need to understand who Khamenei was, not just as a political figure, but as an institution. Imagine someone ruling a country for 37 years with absolute unchallenged authority. He was 86 years old and had been in declining health, yet he maintained an iron grip on every institution in the Iranian state. He had personally witnessed and outlasted every American president from Bush to Trump. That longevity was not accidental. It was the product of a system he himself engineered. Khamenei was originally a protégé and chosen successor of Ayatollah Khomeini, the architect of the 1979 Islamic Revolution. When Khomeini chose him, Khamenei was not even technically qualified to hold the title of Ayatollah. The constitution was amended specifically so that he could succeed Khomeini, a sign of how deeply personal the transfer of power was. After that point, Khamenei built something more durable than a dictatorship. He built a theocratic state with multiple interlocking layers of loyalty. The Revolutionary Guards, the judiciary, the intelligence apparatus, the media, all were brought into alignment with Khamenei's vision through a combination of ideology, patronage, and fear. When Iranians rose up, in the Green Movement, in the protests following Mahsa Amini's death in 2022, and again in 2026 amid economic collapse, the IRGC crushed each uprising with merciless efficiency. Khamenei's system was designed to be self-repairing, self-reinforcing, and deeply resistant to change from below. The conflicting images from Iran's streets right now say everything. Iranian state television is showing mourning processions and weeping citizens. International media is showing the opposite, people celebrating in the streets, clapping, embracing. Both images are likely authentic. Iran is a divided country. There are those who genuinely believed in the system Khamenei built, and there are millions who suffered under it. What happens in the collision between these two forces will define the next chapter of Iranian history. This is the question that keeps security analysts and foreign ministers awake tonight. Do not make the mistake of treating Iran as a fragile peripheral state. Iran is a regional superpower that was standing on the threshold of nuclear weapons capability. It possesses among the most sophisticated ballistic missile arsenals of any non-nuclear state on Earth. Supersonic ballistic missiles that even Israel acknowledges it fears. Before this crisis, the only power capable of striking Iran with the kind of clean, overwhelming precision we saw yesterday was the United States. Here is what we know about the succession structure. Iran's constitution provides a defined mechanism for power transfer. When the supreme leader is incapacitated or dies, a council comprising the head of the judiciary, senior guardian council members, and the president takes temporary control, pending a new appointment. Khamenei himself had privately identified 3 possible successors. One of them is reportedly Mojtaba Khamenei, his own son, though Khamenei had publicly stated he did not want hereditary succession. Interestingly, the grandson of Ayatollah Khomeini also appears on the shortlist. But here is the detail that demands the most serious attention. Khamenei, aware that he was a target, had pre-authorized a small group of IRGC generals to continue military operations in his absence. He gave them command independence, the authority to decide what retaliatory actions to take without requiring further authorization from civilian leadership. This means the chain of command is not broken. It has been deliberately designed to survive his assassination. Iran currently possesses over 2,000 ballistic missiles. It also has between 3,000 and 6,000 naval mines that could be deployed to blockade the Strait of Hormuz, choking off up to 20% of all global oil and LNG shipments at a stroke. Dubai is already being targeted as a deliberate soft power strategy. By hitting a global commercial and tourism hub, Iran maximizes international economic pressure on America at minimum military cost. The message to the world is clear. This war has costs for everyone, not just the combatants. The situation is not resolved. The Strait of Hormuz may not reopen tomorrow. Dubai's airport is not guaranteed to resume normal operations. A desperate state, and make no mistake, Iran is currently in a desperate state, is capable of desperate actions. Do not assume that because the head has been severed, the body will simply collapse. Question 4. Can forced regime change bring peace? What does history actually say? Let us be serious and historically honest here. What America and Israel have done is the easy part. Assassination is the easy part. Destroying a command structure is the easy part. Filling the vacuum that follows, that is where history offers its most brutal lessons. Look at Iraq. America removed Saddam Hussein, declared mission accomplished, and then spent 2 decades watching the country fracture, bleed, and generate new, more extreme forms of violence. Look at Libya. Gaddafi was removed, and the country descended into a failed state that became a transit point for arms, migrants, and terrorist organizations. Look at Afghanistan. In each case, the pattern is identical. The regime falls, a power vacuum opens, and into that vacuum flows chaos, extremism, and civil war. Iran is a far more complex society than Iraq or Libya. It has a highly educated urban population, a sophisticated civil society, deep ethnic and religious divisions between Persians, Kurds, Arabs, Azeris, and Baluchis, and decades of suppressed political energy. The post-Khamenei landscape has at minimum 3 possible trajectories. The best-case scenario is a smooth transition of power to a new supreme leader who, while perhaps somewhat more moderate, continues to run the Iranian state on roughly the same foundations. The war with America and Israel de-escalates. Iran recalibrates. A new equilibrium is reached. This is possible but not guaranteed. The second scenario is that hardliners, generals and clerics who believe the revolution must be defended to the last, seize the moment and take power. In this scenario, the assassination of Khamenei becomes a rallying cry. The message to the Iranian people becomes, "They killed our leader. Now we fight." In this scenario, Iran's remaining missile arsenal, its proxy networks across the region, and its nuclear program all become instruments of revenge rather than deterrence. The third, and most dangerous scenario, is the Doomsday scenario. Iran fractures entirely, along ethnic and regional lines the way Syria did. Different armed factions carve out their own territories. The central government ceases to function. In this scenario, who controls those 2,000 ballistic missiles? Who controls the nuclear facilities? At that point, the United States would face enormous pressure to deploy ground troops, the very outcome that Trump's political base would consider an absolute betrayal. This scenario could be Trump's political undoing even as it becomes the world's strategic nightmare. What does this mean for the world order and for USA? This is the question that concerns me the most as someone speaking specifically to an Indian audience. And I want to be direct. Some people in India are celebrating today. I understand the impulse. Khamenei was no friend of USA's interests in certain respects, but I want to urge serious caution because what has happened today has implications that extend far beyond Iran, and those implications could very directly affect USA in the years to come. Think about what has happened from the perspective of international law and global order. No UN authorization, no international coalition, no congressional debate, no diplomatic ultimatum. One country and one intelligence agency decided unilaterally to assassinate the head of a sovereign state and launch coordinated airstrikes on that country's military and political leadership. And the international community's response? Silence. France and the UK have effectively blessed the operation. Europe, which panicked when Trump raised the specter of annexing Greenland, has raised no serious objection to the assassination of a head of state. This is not just hypocrisy. This is the formal collapse of the rules-based international order. The order that was built after 1945, imperfect, unequal, frequently manipulated, but which at least maintained the nominal principle that sovereign states could not simply be bombed into regime change at will. That principle is now dead. And its death sends a message to every government on Earth. The rules no longer protect you. What protects you is either nuclear weapons or American favor. Consider the nuclear deterrence signal this sends. Saddam Hussein had no nuclear weapons. He was killed. Gaddafi abandoned his nuclear weapons program under American pressure and international guarantees of security. He was killed. Khamenei had no nuclear weapons. He has been killed. Kim Jong-un has nuclear weapons. America does not threaten regime change in North Korea. The lesson is unmistakable. Nuclear weapons are the only reliable guarantee of state survival against American power. How many countries around the world are drawing exactly this conclusion tonight? And here is the China dimension. China has been watching all of this very carefully. The logic of what America has just done in Iran mirrors exactly the logic China has been constructing around Taiwan. China will observe that the international community offered no meaningful resistance when a nuclear-armed great power acted unilaterally to eliminate the leadership of a regional state. China will note that Europe prioritized its economic relationship with America over the defense of international legal norms. When China moves on Taiwan, and we should be clear-eyed that the timeline for that possibility has likely accelerated, it will use exactly this precedent to justify its actions. What comes next? In the next 24 to 72 hours, we are watching for three critical developments. First, does Iran's military command structure hold together and execute coordinated retaliatory strikes, or does it fracture into competing factions? Second, does the Iranian succession process produce a stabilizing transitional authority, or does it immediately descend into a power struggle between moderate pragmatists and hardline ideologues? Third, how does the rest of the world respond? And specifically, does China decide that the moment to act on Taiwan has arrived? We are living through one of the most consequential moments in 21st century geopolitics. Whether you think Khamenei deserved his fate or not, and I understand there are many who suffered under his rule and feel no grief today, the manner in which this has been done and the world it has created demands serious, sober analysis rather than celebration. The redefinition of war that we have witnessed, precision strikes, intelligence penetration, cyber attacks, hacked apps used to trigger street protests, pre-planted explosives activated by remote command. This is the new face of conflict. Every major power is studying Mossad's playbook tonight. Here on JPtruelens, we will continue to track this story as it develops, giving you the clearest, most honest, and most rigorously analytical picture we can. Because in a world where the information itself has become a weapon, the most important thing is the ability to think clearly and to understand not just what is happening, but what it means for all of us. Stay with JPtruelens. The story is far from over.